We are back in session and we'll now move to our Educator Standards and Practice Committee, and I recognize the committee's chair, Dr. Olivia Oxendine.
Thank you, Chairman Davis. I am Olivia Oxendine. I chair this committee. Alongside me in this capacity is Miss Amy White. We have several items on the agenda for this month. The first item is an action on first reading, and it pertains to emergency rules for House Bill 107 and SBE amendments. And this particular item is going to impact TCED 008 and TCED 013. And coming forward to present this item is Dr. Andrew Seibert.
Good afternoon, board members.
Good afternoon.
So what I'd like to talk with you about is first House Bill 107, and House Bill 107 sort of tees up the policy adjustments that we've been making with Pepsi and the recommendations that are coming forward. So House Bill 107 recently became law back in July of 2019, so a couple weeks ago, July 22nd. And in there are effectively three actions that the Board of Education is going to need to take, and they happen at different times. The first is that the board needs to adopt rules necessary to establish standards of performance based on three accountability measures that are set up in that law. And that one, it is effective at the point at which the bill became law, so we need to adjust that as soon as we can. The second one is adopting a small group exception rule, which I'll explain in a couple of slides here, and that one is due October 1st. And then the third, the way the bill was crafted, there is an opportunity for a deep introspective look at developing a formulaic performance-based weighted model. And the way they've set it up is essentially we can gather our colleagues together and come up with the best possible weighted model that we can, and then share with them that weighted model to the Joint Legislative Committee in February with the idea of where we might apply it and what kind of timeline might be in place for applying it, and they will also consider opportunities to maybe change the bill, or propose future bills to make some changes if they feel that model makes really good and nuanced sense. So those are the three actions that are facing the Board of Education regarding House Bill 107. And I want to share now a little bit about the input in the process. My colleague, Dr. Evans, and I have been working pretty diligently over the past couple weeks trying to gather input in this process. A lot of that input is attached to the information that's provided to you in the form of a variety of feedback sources. We've been engaged with the professional standards group, Pepsi, with their assessment and performance subcommittee for a number of months now, really since about December on this idea of developing a model, as well as thinking carefully about sanctions associated with that. We've also engaged Tom West and Julie Cowell. They are representatives of the independent colleges and universities, as well as the UNC General Administration. We also roped in the Education Policy Initiative at Carolina, which is also known as EPIC. Dr. Kevin Bastian's been instrumental helping us with designing some of the models that these groups have been looking at. We also had some stakeholder meetings last week with the EdPrep program leadership, so the various deans and program leaders across the state shared some input as well. And then we also had the meeting with Pepsi. We convened a special meeting yesterday to keep the ball moving, given that some of these have such short time frames. So to that end, let's talk a little bit about what are the measures of accountability that are in 107. The first is to develop a performance, or to look at the measure that is performance based on the standards and criteria of annual evaluations. Another way of looking at that is to think about NESIS and how teacher evaluation by principals is incorporated into accountability. The second one is proficiency and growth of students taught by educators holding an initial license, and that's to the extent practicable. Where we're at right now is the Pepsi Commission is bringing forth in this policy the growth portion of that requirement, and we're still working on developing a strategy around the topic that is proficiency. So then the third one is the results from an educator satisfaction survey. That instrument has been in place for a couple of years, and those are the three measures then that are required in law of 107. So the State Board, again, is going to adopt eventually rules necessary to establish these standards of performance. So at this point, what Pepsi has done is they've pushed forth two policy recommendations, which I'm going to share with you next. And then ultimately what we're going to do between now and next week, which is our regularly scheduled Pepsi meeting, is we will go back to Pepsi with a couple little adjustments to these policies I'm going to share with you based off of the conversations we had at the last Pepsi meeting. And then we will get back to this group as quickly as we can, the two finished policies as well as the corresponding rules associated with those policies, in the hopes that you all can review those and approve them to make the deadline of October 1. So TCED 013 has to do with accountability requirements and reporting. And in there, we've replaced the existing reporting obligations. There's a whole page and a half of reporting obligations associated with, what we should be providing publicly and how we should be providing it. And that list has changed a little bit, and so we're updating that information in there. We're in TCED 013, we're also laying out how the standards are being set, as well as what those standards are. The various stakeholders have come to consensus that a 4-point level system has the broadest consensus of moving forward, and that's based off of Educator Preparation Program standard deviation. And then this table here sort of lays out, if you, and this was one of the questions that ultimately needs to be added to the policy. One of the questions was, could you actually put this into the policy? And the answer is yes. So when we take a sort of a scientific approach to looking at the various data, this is how the different levels would roll out, and these are the thresholds by which each of these education preparation programs will be held to. Again, when you're looking at this data, the level 1 would be the level at which sanctions would be considered to an EPP, whether that be probation, warning, or revocation. There's a lot of little fine details associated with what happens when, but level 1 is where sanctions would be incurred. And then, again, thinking about how the sanctions group subcommittee has been working with the accountability subcommittee, the idea of having different levels sets an opportunity for programs to think about developing over time, set goals and objectives to move themselves from good to great. It also sets an opportunity for challenging programs that need additional support to leverage best practice in high-flying programs and to share best practice across. So there's an opportunity here for growth and support among the EPPs so that we can continue to provide high rigor and high quality outcomes in those programs. Another thing to keep in mind is that these ranges are going to be set for this year, and then they'll remain in effect through 2023 and 24, giving it a 5-year window before reevaluation in that process. So this next thing I want to show you is the accountability conditions. So there are some if-then statements associated with this process. The first is that each of the measures, remember we went over 3 measures here, each of the measures is going to be assessed over the 3 most current consecutive years of data. So we're taking each EPP's graduates, and we're looking at 3 years worth of their graduate cohorts, and we're putting them together to get a bigger data set. Now, the reason for that has to do with the second bullet, and that is that the thresholds met or exceeded are going to need to be disaggregated by race, ethnicity, and gender. And when you start to disaggregate smaller programs, you very quickly get to very, very small sample sizes. And so we're already going to aggregate over 3 years so that we can have more opportunity to look at some of these subgroups within the overarching EPP. And then ultimately, we're going to set those sample sizes at an N of 10. So those are some of the conditions associated with the process. Now for the small group exception. In the small group exception, step one would be to take a look at all the EPPs and look at their overall data on these 3 measures. And if a program does not have any subgroups to look at over the 3-year aggregate, then step 2 would be to look at the overall measure. So instead of looking at subgroups, that we would just, you have a very small program, let's just look at your overall program. Because that's where we're at, and in some few cases, there's about 4 institutions where they will still fall below that threshold. And to that end, for the moment, Pepsi has pushed forth the recommendation to hold those small programs accountable to the same accountability standards and measures as the larger ones at that point. So even if if Andrew University only had 4 students in it over 3 years, then I still would be held to the same accountability short term. And then Pepsi is going to be looking over the coming weeks and month or two to develop a stronger alternative to that. But this was an exception that has been seen in a couple of other states, and it seemed like a good place to start. And again, if you look at the way 107 is worded, the point at which sanctions are levied on EPPs doesn't happen immediately. There's an opportunity for the EPPs to get data to see where they would fall in this continuum. This might be a year where this program could get a sanction, but we're not issuing sanctions until, I think it's 21-22. So the point is, we have a little bit of time. We can adjust for that. But this is the best thinking on the short-term turnaround, and that's TCED 013. So that's the accountability side of things, and then TCED 008. When you have accountability, the law 107 basically just set up what the different sanctions would be. They would be a warned status, a probation status, and a revoked status, but they didn't say what exactly happens to an EPP when they get that designation. And so what you'll see in 008 is, again, Pepsi's best thinking with stakeholder support around the specific requirements around reporting and remediation expectations to try and bring those programs that are out of compliance back into compliance. And that's leveraging some of the higher flying programs to help share and critique and provide additional support in that process. So there's a table in there on 008 that sort of lays out what happens when you have those sanctions. Lastly, I want to go over the next steps. I know this was listed initially as a vote on first read. But given the amount of things that are going on behind the scenes with the short time frame, I think a way to think about this is to know that Pepsi is going to go back to work next week, and next week we'll take what you're seeing today and we'll update 2 things. One is a little bit of technicality on how the calculations are made for the assessment. There's like a sentence that needs to be changed in there. And then we'll add that table that lays out what are the thresholds associated with each of the level systems. In addition to that, the Pepsi Stakeholder Commission will then review the rules associated with the policies, because they couldn't really do that until we were okay with, and stable on the policy side of things. And then we'll get that back to you all as fast as we can, knowing that the technical deadline in 107 is consideration and approval by the board for the first two items by October 1. And then with board approval, the small exception rule and the standards will then go to the Joint Legislative Education Oversight Committee in October. So essentially we're taking what is approved over here over to the legislature to review and learn from and consider. And we'll continue our stakeholder discussions for creating the weighted performance model with as much rigor and nuance as we possibly can, and know that that is a deadline that's approaching for February of 2020. So we already have a start on that. We already have performance models that various stakeholders have looked at. They've given us feedback. We're going back to the drawing board to consider some additional nuances to that. And as we get closer to more specific processes, we'll get them out to you. I think one of the attachments actually has some of the modeling in it, as well as a webinar with me sort of walking folks through how to interpret that data, because it's rich and has a lot of data in it. So if anybody has any questions about that, I'd be happy to navigate that with you. And then lastly, all of this is eventually to rest in an all EPP dashboard, which will be an online system. That was a requirement from 599, and we're working with SAS to try and build that as quickly as we can, essentially taking all the data from all the different data sets that we're collecting, and we're trying to convert that into visual analytics, a way for you to quickly consume data telescopically. So if I want to look at these particular institutions and compare them to these over here, or this subgroup, or this specific thing that interests me and my work, that you can actually do that, as opposed to Andrew working behind the scenes creating static documents that you would have to go through thousands of pages to be able to do what we could do online very easily. Okay.
Thank you very much. That is a lot of work. Let me open the floor for questions and probably more questions. Questions? Yes, please.
So as a public school educator and principal, I can't help but think of the phrase school performance grades. When we talk about evaluating our public schools, I wonder if you see the direction this is heading with EPPs as a school performance grade for EPPs that might have some lessons learned from our own journey with school performance grades that might apply to EPPs. Do you foresee a time in which, for example, in East Carolina or UNC Chapel Hill or an A&T might have an A, B, or C for their EPP performance?
It's a great question, and I can share with you that the stakeholders that we've been communicating with are very well aware of the accountability system that's in the public school system, and the level system that they've been thinking about, the level 1, 2, 3, and 4 could be considered that sort of a similar sort of process. One thing that the stakeholders have been a little bit adverse to, in terms of having accountability, we need to have accountability and transparency in the process and be able to easily see what's going on in the program. It is very difficult to say that this particular program is 14th and this other program is 19th, right? So the idea of saying, we set thresholds and criteria and we meet those standards or exceed those standards, or we fall within a continuum of that, the stakeholders' position is that seems to be a more favorable light, so that what we've been tinkering with is the idea of, here's the top tier in alphabetical order, here's the second tier. So think of, distinguished, accomplished, proficient, right, and needing additional support. So thinking about them in those different tiers tends to be the level of granularity that stakeholders have been voicing.
Follow-up question?
Absolutely.
Do you anticipate, as these designations are applied to EPPs, that there will be mandatory reporting of those EPPs by letter to all stakeholders that participate in that institution, including people who are currently in that EPP, so that, for example, if the EPP were to be designated as a developing EPP, that all of the teacher candidates that are in that program would be, for example, sent a letter saying you're in a developing EPP, not in a proficient, accomplished, or distinguished.
Yeah.
Again, just applying some of the experiences that public schools have had with school performance grades to EPP.
Yes, the answer to that is yes, and we actually already have that in 013, that some of the supports that you'll see there is making sure that the student population that's associated with a struggling school is made aware of that, and that the school is making accommodations to adjust for that. So yes, those are considered and are continuing to develop as we think of not just what you've seen right now, but also as we think about the weighted performance model that's going to come out, which you'll be able to see in a couple of months in anticipation of the deadline for February. So yes, those are in the discussions for sure.
Mr. Buxton?
A question about the support side of the accountability coin. So accountability systems are great if you've got the support for improvement. A concern that even with the multitudes of folks on your staff, Mr. Syberg, we don't have a great capacity to actually help a struggling EPP who shows up as in need of support. And just interested, not that you've kind of crossed the bridge on this yet, but just interested in your thinking about how we start building some capacity if in fact we're identifying people as in need of significant improvement and marching towards revocation, how we help them get better.
Right. So I think I think a couple things. One is the legislature's efforts to try and create an online dashboard, I think, provides a level of transparency that you can see thriving schools, average schools, and schools that need additional support. So one step very quickly is you can see if I'm an institution that is struggling in a particular area, that I can very quickly look across the field and see if there are other institutions that are thriving in the same area that I might be struggling in. And I think our job here at the department, given our limited resources, is to provide an opportunity to make connections, to bridge folks, to bridge organizations. I think places like NCACTI, which is the North Carolina Association of Educator Preparation Programs, I don't know that I said that exactly based on what the acronym is, but it's an organization that supports public and private institutions and EPPs in general. I think knowing those systems, leveraging NCICU, leveraging the general administration, building relationships with stakeholders around the academic community, I think will be really helpful and instructive. Leveraging best practices, husbanding best practices so that we can post them on our website, so that we can provide opportunities for folks who are interested in expanding specific areas. Are there opportunities that we can house best practices so people can learn from that? I think that's a really important position. And I also think that there are different needs for different institutions, right? So there's humongous institutions that are producing hundreds and hundreds of graduates, and then there are little small programs that are producing just a handful of programs. And so their needs, the money, the resources they have, the staffing they have different needs in different situations. So I think, trying to gather all that information and be a conduit of that information, I think is going to be a really important next step as we first identify how folks are doing and where they need additional supports, and then leverage where we know that we have good supports in place and how to move those forward from there.
Quick follow-up.
Absolutely.
Do we have any sense from these three, and assuming that we probably don't with the surveys, of where our folks would shake out on this right now?
We do. I'm not prepared to just kind of pull that out of a hat, but yeah. So what we did was we created one of your artifacts in the handouts is the various models that we looked at, and again, we're looking at two different things in there. One is the what we call the sanction models, which is these are the three accountability measures, and we're looking at how we cook them up different ways with different analytical procedures. And then the second is to start to think about a performance weighted model. So what So this is what we have to do in law, step one, and then step two is, can we come up with a nuanced, really comprehensive and holistic perspective of EPPs? And to that end, we have those in there as well. So the short answer is yes. So we've run not hypothetical data. This is real data, because those 3 performance measures, as well as the performance measures we collect on 7 or 8 different items, we've collected over multiple years. So we can actually create models in real time as if we were dropping the needle today. So it's not like we're saying we're going to start this process and see what happens when we collect data in the next coming years. We actually have data to at least inform the field right out of the gate. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Mr. Forrest?
So along those same lines, if the model has not yet been solidified, right, if there's some flexibility in how this can be built, I'm wondering if if we have leverage here to build into that model some quality points or something around how diverse the graduates are. And as you mentioned, numerically for the smaller programs, it may not be fair to look at number, but maybe proportion of the graduating class. Something of that nature that could be built into that. And I feel like, one, that'd be in alignment with our new strategic plan, but just 2, there has to be something beyond us continuing to declare that we need to diversify that is systemic in nature, right? That's built into the way that we're beginning to evaluate. And so I just wondered if that's a possibility and one that you would consider exploring.
Well, it's not only a possibility, it's actually a pretty heavy discussion in the Pepsi subcommittees. It's been an ongoing discussion for a number of months. Now, how we actually come up with that, there are some limitations associated with that, because if you recall, EPP programs are pulling from the junior year of their institutions. So in some cases, they're limited to the population of their institution, not necessarily we're going out and recruiting, right? But there are ways to think about that. So what is the percentage of ethnicity, race, gender, and ethnicity within the program, and then have you met or exceeded that in your own EPP at the junior year? So these are the kind of things that I think you're going to see bear out over time as we're talking about it. But yes, that is a discussion. It's certainly an item that is on the forefront of both subcommittees, both the accountability and the sanctions subcommittee.
Other questions? It just reaffirms the importance of Pepsi, the premium of Pepsi, and the work that Pepsi does to support our work and inform us of the best directions to take, and constantly keeping us updated on the work of Pepsi. And this alone, I would imagine, is going to consume a great amount of your meeting time going forward. I see you nodding, Dr. Miller. Nodding.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. And if I may,
may.
just like to commend the Pepsi staff, Andrew Seiberg, Kim Evans, and Tom Tomberlin. They have done yeoman's work on this issue since House Bill 107 was passed this summer, up against tight timelines. And also Representative Horn was here this morning. He has been an active participant in the discussions as well.
And thank you so much, and accepting the findings and the reviewing and confronting and processing the data by our EPPs. That's going to be a change in academia, and recognizing the need to reach out for support and help. And I don't want to use the word remediation because it doesn't seem to fit the context, but for additional support to be reflective and to self-assess and to decide, how can we improve so that we are producing and we're placing in classrooms the very best teachers and the very best counselors and principals and all educators combined. So this is major work, folks, and it's good work, and it's placing us, North Carolina, on the cutting edge. I'm proud to be a part of it. Thank you. So we are going to act on this tomorrow, my colleagues around the table, and this is what the ask of the State Board is, that we approve moving forward with the emergency rules that are dictated in this House Bill 107.
Well, just a point of clarity, I think, we've brought forth the 2 policies. We have not brought the rules yet, and the rules won't be ready until next week, at which time Pepsi will have a chance to look at them. They will be very reflective of the policies. And another footnote is that in our Pepsi meeting that there were 2 little changes that need to be updated in there. So it may be easier to vote on this after next week's Pepsi meeting, just as an FYI.
Yeah, that will certainly require a special meeting of the board, so we'll target the 25th or 26th of September, so be on the lookout for a notice from Dr. Townsend Smith.
If I may,
Yes,
Dr.
Dr.
Oxenden.
Miller.
Representative Horn is aware of the October 1 timeline approaching and has indicated that he wouldn't put anybody in jail if we voted on it on October the 2nd or 3rd, so, at the next regularly scheduled state board meeting. So just to keep that in
We're all
mind.
relieved.
Because we do tend to follow the law.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cyber. The next item on the agenda is an action item. Board members, this item was originally, a few weeks ago, it was placed under consent, and I made the decision to let's put it back on action, let's replace it on the agenda so that we could go back and talk about it a bit more, ask any questions and any clarity that you need around that. So that is the reason it moved from consent to action. And we have Dr. Coogan at the mic, and she is prepared to do just that, to provide additional information and to give you an opportunity to raise your questions and your comments. Dr. Coogan, welcome.
Thank you very much. Great to be back. So I can provide just a general overview of some of the key pieces to kind of kick us off, and then I'm happy to answer any additional questions that folks may have. A few elements here. The big focus of what we're trying to accomplish with the proposed state partnership agreement that you have before you from AQEP that has gone through vetting processes within our DPI agency through legal, and that is what you are looking at right now, is to open up an opportunity for all approved EPPs in North Carolina to consider joining National Educator Preparation Accreditation with 2 different agencies available to them. We have the CAPE partnership agreement that we already have in place right now, which is a 5-year partnership agreement that began on July 1st of 2016, and it's slated to terminate on June 30th of 2021. Although I do have understood that they are open to beginning conversations at any point to reevaluate the partnership and to reestablish that partnership as would be helpful for North Carolina. The AQEP agreement is proposed following a similar 5-year timeline so that they're both using a 5-year timeline structure. So that's what we have in front of us here. These types of agreements help open up opportunities and provide framework and direction as far as how it helps to inform DPI and the work that comes out of this agency. This is the scope of work of my full-time position here at DPI as being a support and a consultant for all of the approved EPPs throughout the entire state who are interested in participating in National Educator Preparation Accreditation. Right now we have 33 who are actively participating, and I have a very strong feeling that that number may rise with this sign of the AQEP agreement because of the additional opportunity that is available to folks. Multiple agreements are beneficial because it does provide the state support and shows that to the entire state and all of our approved EPPs. And that would be something that could definitely open up more opportunities for some who are currently not participating in accreditation but are very much interested to do so.
Very good. Any questions from my colleagues? Mr. Buxton.
And I will admit that this is largely driven by my read of Education Week articles, because I don't know much about these specific ones. So
Okay.
just help disabuse some notions that I've read about.
I will do my best.
What does it mean if you're not nationally accredited?
That.
Which I understand AQEP is not.
No, so AQEP is a nationally accredited agency. They're
Okay.
a National Educator Preparation Accreditation Agency. So they are a viable, open for business agency option for any approved educator preparation program in any state.
Right, and do you get accredited, does someone like CAPE get it accredited by someone else?
There is, yes, so there is an option for an accreditor of the accreditation agencies.
That's what I'm thinking.
Okay, so that would be CHIA, the Council for Higher Education Accreditation. They were founded in 1996, and their purpose is to serve as a gatekeeper for accreditation agencies, and that's not specific to educator preparation. That is something that CHIA decided to revise their processes and procedures, and so they kind of shut their doors temporarily. They just reopened them again in July, and so AQEP is going through the process to obtain their CHIA accreditation. The timeline of AQEP holding CHIA is not an inhibiting factor for EPPs to choose to join them, nor would it be an inhibiting factor for the state to enter into this partnership.
Okay, and this is where my question is. So we don't require our EPPs to do accreditation. It's optional for them.
Correct.
And so having another option for them makes sense. But if we think of ourselves as a little bit gatekeepers for students choosing those institutions or school districts looking at the standards and value, then the accreditation matters because they send some kind of signal. So I'm just trying to get comfort why we would choose someone who's not accredited, number one. And then number two, again, leaning on my Ed Week read, why do some people see this as accreditation light? And I have no, I'm just asking that because that's what I've read.
Sure. So to your first point, I think the timing of this provides an opportunity for folks who are interested in pursuing AQEP because it's a better fit for their EPP to be able to act, and knowing that the state supports that, they're more inclined to do so now. Having CHIA recognition is not slowing folks down. We see that evidenced by Lenore Ryan. We see that evidenced by other EPPs that as a result of the conversation that took place last month, folks have already begun conversations within their institutions in order to switch. We see that by a firm support by the NCACTI group in North Carolina, by the NCICU group in North Carolina, supporting this partnership to move forward. So the CHIA component is not something that is inhibiting folks from moving forward. And AQEP is in the process to obtain it, but they can only go as fast as CHIA will allow them to go. So those are things that they're working towards. They're already in the process. It's going to happen, and it's not something that will slow anybody down or discredit them by not having it. There are actually several accreditation agencies in lots of fields that exist that don't have CHIA accreditation, and they still thrive in their respective fields. So that's one of the components. I believe that may be a distinguishing point for this conversation because the only other accreditation agency that exists for educator preparation happens to hold CHIA. So it's a point of distinguishment that can be made right now. Okay. As far as to the point of why would we go with someone at the moment, that is a very subjective question, sir. I can share with you why I believe that the state would be benefited by entering into this partnership because we will open up the opportunity to EPPs and showing that state support. It will provide the context and another framework for EPPs who are interested that might be a better fit for their model or their size and the resources that they have while still holding true to the rigor. But there is absolutely, in my humble opinion, no truth to the fact that it's less rigorous. It's similar quality assurance.
And that last question, Dr. Oxenstein, that's my biggest thing is I want you to put my concern at rest that I can turn to a Dr. Miller and say, we are bringing an accreditor who we think guarantees a standard that is not lesser than what we have right now, and that is going to turn out people aligned with your goals. Mm-hmm. So even though I read their standards, there's nothing about student outcomes in them, which concerns me a little bit.
That's not true.
Okay, show me.
No, it isn't.
Can you just show me? I just couldn't see it.
I have not read the article, but
It's not an article. It's there from their website.
I can show you in the handbook. Absolutely.
Yeah, I just want to see that because I think we have a responsibility to the districts to say we're providing an option that is high quality, and I just don't know AQEP from
Absolutely.
So I'm just trying to get comfortable with that.
Sure. And another resource of information that might be helpful is in the August materials, there were the short handouts that were provided by both agencies that summarizes what the different standards are for the initial level and the advanced level for CAPE. And then AQEP also has their standards, and that can provide a side-by-side comparison. But they both absolutely look at candidate candidate and completer performance. AQEP will also go a little bit further into the PK through 12 partnership agreement requiring that, but they both have very high standards on clinical experience, clinical partnerships, that entire training, both looking for co-constructed and collaborative types of experiences with the EPP as well as with the community and the entire school districts that they're working with.
That answers my question.
Very good. And have you completed the,
Yes, ma'am.
thank you, Teresa. And Dr. Tomberlin, do you want to step forward?
Yeah, excuse me, Dr. Coogan. I just wanted to emphasize in the question of the quality of CAPE versus AAQEP. I mean, I think it's a fair question to raise, but that signal that CAPE or AQEP would send to prospective students, that is the responsibility of the institutions that are seeking that accreditation to balance and weigh. Do I want to be CAPE accredited as a drawing card for potential students? That wouldn't be a decision that we would want to impose or make for them. However, about the quality of the candidates coming out, as Dr. Seiberg just explained, we're in the process of developing a very rigorous accountability system for our EPPs in North Carolina that neither CAPE nor AQEP will begin to touch in terms of what it can communicate to potential teachers and what the best route is. And so I would say, if that's our concern, let's make sure we're putting that as the priority on the Ed Prep dashboard, and the issues of which accreditation route I go down is the purview of the institution at large, and we're going to measure outcomes on the EPPs and be able to signal to folks that's where you want to go if you want to become the best teacher in North Carolina.
Thank you very much. Well said, well made. Mr. Allen?
Quickly, is CAPE referred to in statutory authority as an accredited agency? Is there anything about either of these agencies in any of the statutes that you're aware of?
Based on the timeline, it's my understanding that the only piece of legislation would be the Session Law 217-189, formerly known as Senate Bill 599, and the timing of that was such that AQEP did not exist. So CAPE is mentioned, but it's not something that is mandating CAPE.
So it's in the statute, but it's not mandated in the statute
Yes,
to
sir.
draw that distinction?
That is correct.
So really the bottom line question for me, and I think this is what Mr. Buxton was getting at, was let's assume we approve this for the moment. We've got these two accrediting agencies. Is there any significant distinction between what their accreditation would mean as between the two different agencies? That is, as an AQIP, and I know you mentioned some comparison of standards, but in the view of staff, as you study this, at the end of the day, is there a significant difference or some differences that are of some meaning about what one does and what one doesn't do in the accreditation process?
Yes, sir. I believe that the biggest difference is going to be experienced and felt by the EPPs themselves, because the process is going to be one of your biggest distinguishing factors. So the process it's providing an opportunity for EPPs of all structure and of all sizes to participate in national educator accreditation at high standards, with high rigor, with high quality, based on evidence-based practices. And so that's one of the differences that you'll end up seeing. So the context, the local context, the community context, those are going to be key factors that are instrumental in establishing the story of that EPP if you're going through the AQEP process, still using very rigorous standards and data, similar to what CAPE will require, but their process is going to look very different. So I think that distinction is going to be felt by your EPPs more specifically.
All right, and I think what partly you're saying is it's a little hard to compare the two exactly. They go about a different way.
Yes.
Other questions or comments? I want to close this discussion by saying I'm neutral. I chair this committee, but I'm a neutral partner, a player in this decision. If I have a choice, or if I have a say, or an opinion, or a druther, it would be in favor of a choice. And it would be in favor, or it's in favor of the right choice. And I believe that the best decider of the right choice will be the institution, will be the campus. the individual campuses, is that as our deans and others who are vitally involved in the accreditation process go to the provost and the officers and the senior administrators who oversee accreditation for the campus, the university, as well as the particular schools and colleges, and the decision will rest with them to decide the right choice. I think what we are called to do is to provide a pathway through policy to allow the institutions, our EPPs, schools and colleges of education, to make that choice. We have heard from several EPPs. You've received the same emails I've received, and they believe in the decision that they've made. The standards for us to draw any kind of comparison or draw any kind of conclusion or assessment of whether one set of standards surpasses the other, I would say that we would need to bring in a neutral party, someone very not subjective but objective group to make that decision. I don't know that we're ready for that to happen. Again, I think the choice that we have before us is about a choice, and providing our EPPs, our universities and colleges, and those in charge of accreditation on the campuses to do that. So, if you have no other questions or comments, and Dr. Tomberlin?
Just one more, and I apologize. Just to make sure everyone's fully informed of what the implications on the policy are. CAPE, a CAPE accredited EPP can become a North Carolina EPP by virtue of the fact that they hold CAPE accreditation. They do not have to be approved by the State Board of Education. You do not have to grant initial authorization to them or anything else. If you accept AAQEP as an alternative to CAPE, you are also accepting AAQEP accreditation as kind of de facto approval of the EPP. And I don't think that was explicitly stated in any of this conversation, and I wanted to make sure that everyone's aware that that's what would be happening, is that we would recognize AAQEP on par with CAPE and grant them that EPP status pro forma rather than through an application process to the State Board of Education.
Question. So there's a new wrinkle. If AAQEP did not achieve, is it CHIA? Mm-hmm. CHIA accreditation, would that be problematic if we were going to also fast track them right into being approved EPP?
From my perspective, no, but the
So what's the
information that was shared was just new for me as well, so I might refer to Dr. Tomberlin to assist.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
If, my understanding is that AAQEP is going through the national accreditation process, the accreditor of accreditors. We would be acting in advance of that.
That is correct.
Quality signal. If they did not receive that,
You could take.
Would that be problematic? Should that be problematic for us?
It potentially could be, if that's of value to the board that they have that CHIA approval. You could revoke that recognition of AAQEP if they did not meet CHIA approval. But my understanding is that this is mostly about a timeline issue with CHIA rather than a concern over the quality of the program.
So we could make it contingent upon that approval if we thought that was an important signal. I mean, I guess part of my concern with the logic I'm hearing is if we just give everyone a choice, maybe I could start an accreditation program tomorrow, and if I made it easy to get through, people would come to me, and then they'd be a provider. Like, we don't want to just provide a choice, we want to provide quality choices aligned with our standards, right? So I trust our staff that this is a pretty good choice, but it's new.
It is new.
Relatively
So
new.
I also want to be very clear that this would have no impact on any existing EPP. That once you're in and functioning, whether you're CAPE certified or whether a current EPP goes to AAQEP, it doesn't matter at all, even if we don't pass the policy. What it impacts is any new entity that decides they want to come in and work in North Carolina. If you grant AAQEP, and I have no judgment in this statement, I'm just telling you the implications of it, you would be putting AAQP on par with CAPE as far as the automatic approval as an EPP in North Carolina. Now, they would still be subject to our accountability standards. We would measure them. If they're not meeting standard, we would shut them down. All that stays the same, and that's true of any CAPE-accredited university or EPP. If they're not meeting our accountability standards, they will enter the sanctions model and be, handled appropriately. So this is just the entry. This gives an EPP the opportunity to do a kind of automatic entry into the system rather than coming to you and requesting like Teachers of Tomorrow did when they came to North Carolina.
And it is my understanding that having CAPE or AQUEP is not subject to any kind of review for sanction purposes.
That's correct.
That's correct.
And to be clear, the whole purpose of the presentation that I had provided was specifically focused on the approved EPPs already, with any future conversation about policy implication is something that could be considered in the future. So that was why I was thought for there.
So,
Yes, Ms.
One
White.
last follow. So, I think you mentioned that there are 33 programs in the state of North Carolina who currently have
AQUEP, or they have accreditation.
They have accreditation.
Yes.
Okay. So, of the remaining,
Yes.
what is the restrictor? What is it that prevents the rest of the body of EPPs from seeking a CAPE certification? What's that? Because we did hear from our private universities and some of our smaller universities. So is it funding? Is it time investment? What is the difference?
Absolutely. So, and again, that will be based on context. So some of it will be funding, some of it will be scope and size and resources available. Some of the EPPs that are approved are not going to be eligible. For example, some of the ones that are in the K through 12 school districts, they don't have the structure that's set up in order to be able to work with that. The alternative programs, however, and the 100% online programs are eligible and are able. Western Governors University is an example. They received AQUEP accreditation in July of 2019. Teachers of Tomorrow is going through AQUEP accreditation right now. They're part of the 2020 cohort along with Lenore Ryan. So the onlines, the alternatives do have options and pathways. The institutions that are based in higher education have options and pathways. I do believe that comes down to a lot of financial context and resources elements that make those decisions.
So one more follow, Dr. Arnson, I'm sorry. So what you've shared is that there are universities already pursuing AQUEP accreditation.
Yes, ma'am.
Without our body's approval or
Yes, ma'am.
not.
Absolutely. Lenore Ryan is, I believe, one of them.
Yes.
I don't know about Campbell. Campbell does have, I'm sorry.
Western.
Yes, yes.
Campbell has expressed an interest.
Other questions? Did you have a follow-up? EPPs in North Carolina are beginning to look very different. We just heard the utterance of teachers of or for, I get the preposition confused, tomorrow. EPPs will continue to reinvent themselves, and we must accommodate that. I feel good about this. Our institutions that we've heard from feel solid about this. I rest my case. Other questions? From you, Dr. Coogan, anything else you would like to share with us?
No, ma'am. I appreciate the consideration by the board.
Thank you very much. That will save my little story about Henry Ford II, who produced only one Model T, and the color was black. And here comes Buick and the Dodge brothers, and they said, we want choice. We want a different color. And thus is the world of competition. Thank you very much. And then we will go to our next item on the agenda, and it is the Pepsi annual report, and Dr. Evans is at the mic to present.
Good afternoon. This afternoon, I'm presenting you with the Pepsi Annual Report for 2018-2019, and it is due on December 1st of 2019. To give you a little overview, this is what the report has within it. It is very similar to last year's outline of the report, including a policy guide and a summary of the meetings and future subcommittee work. The membership itself, this is the one piece that has changed within Pepsi, and it will now be staggered membership thanks to Senate Bill 686 and Senate Bill 334. And this is what the staggered membership will look like. Members that have a term ending in 2020 are listed there, and then within 2021 as well. The one caveat is Andrew Lacus. He will remain the NC State Superintendent appointment until further notice. And those members leaving Pepsi are Freebird McKinney, Robin Hyatt, and Joseph Childers. And so right now we have a new member, Mariah Morris, welcome, and Michael D. Hicks. He is unable to become a new member because of the scheduling obligations because he is a CTE teacher. So we have made that aware to the legislature, and they will get back to us on who the replacement will be. And also another pending replacement would be for Joseph Childers, who is principal in Winston-Salem. Overall, there were 24 commission meetings. 11 of them were subcommittee meetings, and then there were 13 monthly meetings. The subcommittee meetings were very rich in topic, a lot on this accountability and sanction models, as Dr. Seiberg talked about, and then also the out-of-state teacher licenses and the math content exam for elementary education and ECGC. And this is a list of future subcommittee work that we will be focusing on, including the accountability models that Dr. Seiberg talked about and revision of LICN 001. Are there any questions?
Questions, colleagues? Again, busy work, a busy commission. And this report is going to the General Assembly, Dr. Evans, did you say?
Yes, yes.
And we will act on that next month. The last item is ES&P 4, and that's the State Board Policy Amendment to the TCED 016 on the Beginning Teacher Support Program. And Dr. Evans, are you presenting that, I suppose? Yes.
To start this off, I wanted to give a timeline overview to make sure everybody is on the same page. So Pepsi received and DPI received feedback from the regional education facilitators in the field and also LEAs to make these changes within TCED 016. And that was in July. And then in August, the monthly Pepsi meeting happened. And the first round of edits was approved by Pepsi. And then directly after that meeting, there were additional requests by refs in the field on behalf of LEAs and charter schools. And after that, yesterday, the second round of edits was approved by Pepsi to come to the board. To give you a general overview, these are 3 of the revisions that were throughout the policy. Links to the handbook for the beginning teachers, moving the mentor standards to the end of the policy, and then replacing the terms LEA or LEA/charter with public school unit. throughout the policy. I forgot to mention, we also had the second round of revisions, or the revisions taken to rules, and they also requested certain edits within the policy. And some of these edits included adding these definitions of public school unit and non-public school unit. So the public school unit would include any LEA, charter school, laboratory school, or innovative school which is supported by state funds. And then the non-public school unit is any school which is not supported by state funds. And that is listed at the top of the policy. In addition, to make it clear on BTSP requirements, all LEAs, of course, are required to follow these requirements for beginning teacher support, but we also wanted to make it clear that charter schools, public schools with charter-like flexibility, and private schools who choose to support teachers with licensure, that they must follow these requirements regardless of any flexibility that they do have through SBE policy or state statute. In addition, there were some policy updates. Instead of saying policy manual, we listed the particular updates and linked to them. And then there were some corrections with general statutes. And to let local boards of education know that they are the only ones to report data for the state of the teaching profession, North Carolina report. In addition, this general statute 115C-325 no longer has the requirement that talks about the definition for year long. And so now we refer to policy LICN 001 section 1.22, and it is defined as working 6 or more calendar months in a fiscal year. This is just a simple correction of replacing optional with required. And actually in the policy, if you look a few sentences down, it already says required working conditions guidelines. It just needed to be replaced, corrected. This is an example of when LEA/charter was within the policy, that it was replaced with public and non-public school unit. And also making sure that they know that it's for approved BTSP plans for both types of school units, and that if they are supporting teachers in the pursuit of NC teacher licensure. This is also stating the same type of thing, but with mentor assignment requirements. And a technical change was already made within the policy. I wanted to make you aware that charter schools have been asking if they are allowed to use alternative teacher evaluation tools other than NESIS. And there was clarification in this piece that is added to the policy saying that, yes, you can, as long as you develop it properly and making it sure that it's validated and that it includes standards and criteria similar to those that exist already in NESIS for the NESIS tool. One other point, which is not in policy, is that there was a request as to whether instructional facilitators are able to be mentors. And according to the definition or the qualifications and requirements within state Senate Bill 599, they are allowed to be mentors, to serve as mentors, to fulfill this policy. Any questions?
The one question I have, Dr. Evans, has to do with the charter schools developing their alternative model. How does the department verify validation?
I believe that the charter school will have to make sure that they have the validation process that they used, that they are able to present that to the agency so that we can see what they have done.
Is there an application, do they apply to do that, or just design it and make an appointment to?
They would design it and go through their process, and that's something that that they would have to present to DPI.
Very good. Thank you very much. Other questions? And this, if none, then this will be taken up next month, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine. We'll now proceed to the Education, Innovation, and Charter Schools Committee, and I'll turn to Ms. White, Chair of that committee.
Thank you, Chair Davis. This is Amy White. I am Chair of the Education, Innovation, and Charter School Committee, and I share that responsibility with Ms. Jill Kamnitz. We have 3 items for discussion today. One is an action on first read, EICS 1. This is a restart application resubmission for Hertford County Schools. It is before you on action on first read, and I have Bev Emery here that'll walk us through that.
Good afternoon. I also want to introduce, we've been shuffling hats, as you know, here in the department. I started out as Director of Regional Support, working with Dr. Petrie Martin, and my first meeting said she would handle Restart and help me figure out how to do that, and then I changed roles. I'm really delighted today to introduce to you the new Director of Regional Support, which is Dr. Cynthia Martin, and I'd like Cynthia to stand up. She's not a stranger to you all, especially this crew over here. She has a fan club amongst teachers and principals of the year. I'm happy to have someone within the department who has been loyal and steadfast and really understands the work, be a new leader there. And so she will move into this role going forward. We are pleased to recommend a request from Hertford County Schools to extend a second year of planning for Restart. They received an Opportunity Culture Grant, and we believe the flexibilities that align with both Restart and Opportunity Culture are good reasons to request this second year so that their efforts are maximized and aligned there. So we would support that. If you have any questions, happy to answer.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Just for those who might be listening in, who might not know what an Opportunity Culture Grant is, can you just give us some brief highlights?
Oh, I will do my I'll do my best. Restart has the ability to have lots of flexibilities, and one of those is in staffing. Opportunity Culture is really a very programmed way to look at how you maximize leaders, master teachers, and it's very unique and tailored to each school. There are districts that have taken on grade levels for Opportunity Culture. There are districts that have really, like Charlotte-Mecklenburg, that have really taken it on and even converted allotments before we had Restart flexibility to exercise Opportunity Culture. I like to look at it from a practitioner's point of view as if I have a rock star third grade teacher and I want that teacher to have impact on 2 classes instead of 1, and use the resources to hire a teacher assistant or some other support in the classroom. That's really what Opportunity Culture affords me. Our Restart schools now have that flexibility as well.
Perfect.
Hope I answered your question.
Questions from colleagues?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Emery, in Edgecombe County, we have 2 Restart schools. Actually, we have 3 Restart schools. 2 of whom are led by amazing school leaders that have come through the Northeast Leadership Academy. All 3 of our Restart schools are paired with an Opportunity Culture model. So what you're describing for Hertford is a model that has worked in our county. But I wanted to ask if you could share a little bit about the way that school leaders are selected for Restart schools, because despite the structure of our Restart model in Edgecombe County, I'm keenly aware of the critical importance of school leaders in those schools, and that the right people being in the right positions make a huge difference regardless of the design of the model. I'm so inspired by the Restart schools in our district, having seen them for over 2 decades, and the work they've done to disrupt systemic inequity. And 2 of the leaders that are leading our Restart schools are under 30 and are just amazing, coming out of out of a non-traditional pathway, particularly with the Northeast Leadership Academy driving their principal preparation. I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about the role of school leaders and the actual people who are at the helm of the Restart Schools, aside from the structure of the application and the opportunity culture model.
I'm not sure you want to open that door for me, but we actually had some of that conversation this morning in an earlier group that met at 8 o'clock, and some of the work that Ms. White talked about, sort of big picture transformation. But, you know, the districts are still picking school leaders, and some of our conversation was around how do we leverage some of those key points that we know can have impact for our students. And of course, leadership is one of them. The current restart process doesn't really provide parameters around selection of school leaders. We do assess how long a leader has been in place. And of course, that's part of what we're working on, is do we need to have more accountability around that, much like low-performing school legislation, where we have to look at leadership over a period of time if there's not growth or progress made in those schools. I concur with what you say. I think part of that, from the department's perspective, is not what is compliance, but how do we provide support for districts. We have large districts that have their own leadership development processes, and we have others that are small and don't have access to those. So I view it as, what could our support system from DPI look like to help grow those leaders and develop them across the state?
I'm a huge fan of this restart model paired with opportunity culture. Could not be more excited for Hertford.
You absolutely could have been a fly. I mean, it was as if you were seated at the table with us in our meeting centered upon turnaround work and the innovative school district. And the consensus around the table was turnaround starts with an effective, dynamic, energetic leader, and age is not a definition, is not included in that definition. And so putting the right people at the helm is critical to any turnaround effort. So we're on your page, and I know that was echoed from our DPI staff as well. So you'll be hearing more about that in October as we talk about strategies for turnaround. So any questions about this particular request from Hertford County? Thank you, Dr. Emery. Let's move to our second item, that's EICS 2, Esty Kaiser Fox's request to terminate its EMO relationship. And I believe Mr. Machado, are you going to come forward and walk us through that? Board members, you heard this last month as a discussion item, so it's back before us for action today.
Thank you, Ms. White. We did discuss this at the last meeting, and I'm open to any questions that you might have. Nothing has changed from last meeting, and our office and the Charter School Advisory Board is confident that this board has the capacity to run the school without the management company.
Questions? Okay, wonderful. Hearing none, we will move to, thank you, Mr. Machado. We'll move to our third item. Excited to hear about our innovative school district with an update. I'm going to call Dr. James Ellerby to the podium to lead us through that discussion, and we are excited to hear.
Good afternoon to members of the board again. I am here as James Ellerby with the Innovative School District to give you a presentation and an update on the progress that we're making with Southside Ashpole, which is the one school that we have identified in the ISD, and also to give you a brief update for SB 522. First of all, as we look at our strategies for supporting this school and our initiatives, we always make sure we come back to look at the vision of the state board, the mission, and the goals that are set out. We focus on in the areas of equity and opportunity because we want to make sure that we're creating innovative conditions in the partnership that we have with our ISO, which is the AAC, or Achievement for All Children. This is the school. picture of it that we currently have in the ISD. And as last month, we showed you where we were with the vacancies, and you can see each one of them are filled except the innovative technology facilitator. And that position has already been interviewed for, and hopefully this person will be accepting the job offer here real soon. Over to the left in the red, if you would notice, Dr. Oxendine asked to make sure that each month that we share our staff attendance, and I'm proud to announce that it's 99.5. And this is crucial because a lot of the professional learning for the curriculum that we use with AAC, the training was given during some of these days. So this is very good. Our enrollment is still down. There are many factors that I could go into, but the point is that we have 216 students at the school currently. I'd like to share the performance data since the data has gone live. As you can see, last year, we were able to highlight the point of meeting growth in the area of mathematics, especially third grade math did exceptionally well. And the next slide would show you how significantly those numbers increased. And the other areas we did not meet, but our goal is to meet all areas coming up this upcoming school year. If you look to the right graph with the math, third grade math, you can see jumped from 16.7% in proficiency to 43.6%. And we know that we had some TOSA or some retired teachers that worked with the third grade math, and we do have those people returning this year. And so we're hoping for even better outcomes there. And then since our teachers are feeling more comfortable with the curriculum, we intend that our reading will increase as well. This is career and college readiness. Third grade math jumped from 8.2 to 12.8. The other areas we still definitely need lots of work in. Strategies for continuous improvement. One is leadership. We've already announced the leadership with Dr. Boring coming on as the school director or the principal of Southside Ashpole. And he's doing a phenomenal job, and I'll be able to share a little more information with that. But I'd like to introduce one of our partners. It is Tricia Cotton. She is the president of Achievement for All Children, and she comes to us with turnaround work, and as well as being a legislator and in school buildings. And already we have started being a very collaborative group, and we really are looking forward to this year. And I'd like for her to come and just say hello to the board for a few minutes.
Thank you, Dr. Ellaby. Good afternoon. It's nice to see some familiar faces. Many of you I've known for years and years. It's really exciting for me to have this opportunity to work at Southside Ashpole Elementary School in Roland and to work with two great instructional leaders, Dr. Ellerby and Dr. Bowen. I think we have really hit the ground running. I've been on the job for 3 weeks now. We have made tremendous improvement of how we want this school year to go. We have a great collaboration. I hope that you will all come and visit our school and come out there. We would love to have you. And I would also ask that, as you know, a hurricane is approaching. And last year, our county was hit really, really badly. We are expecting the same problems this year, so please keep us in your thoughts. But thank you for this opportunity. This is a new day, and it's going to get better, and I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome.
Tricia, thank you so much. I would also like to bring to your forefront some of the things that we're going to do as strategy specifically focused on working with students and getting their parents involved. And I want to highlight the center column, which is the school. As I shared before, we have a very innovative, passionate, hitting the ground running leader there at the school, and the teachers have all complimented the type of leadership that they're getting there at the school. We are going to be implementing the iStation for our K-3 literacy approach and the support we need in literacy. Established the Innovative Learning Commons, which is the media center that was taken by the hurricane, but we've been able to secure funds to be able to replace the furniture in the media center and set it up more like an innovative technology type center with collaborative stations. And the company that we're working with, they're also going to actually donate a classroom to us, which is the STEM and the Innovation Lab that you see on the last bullet in the middle section. I also wanted to highlight we're going to go one-to-one, and then we're going to expand the student worldview. The school has talked about exposing these kids to more environments than they have before, because most of them only been in the Rolling area or not far outside of that area. So that is going to be a focus for this year. And the development of the Parent Resource Center, and AAC was very helpful in donating $10,000 that the school leader had a vision of putting washers and dryers and computers and things in a classroom so that parents could feel free to come out and utilizes those services. But at the same time, the school leadership plans to talk with them about being volunteers and being actively involved with their students' learning. These are areas where we're going to be making sure that we focus in collaboration, and especially providing feedback and the progress monitoring piece. We had some recent events, and these are the events that occurred this past month. As I shared with you before, we would be sharing each month what we would be doing, and if you look at the bottom where to be determined, TBD, these are the upcoming events that will be occurring that we will be reporting on. I must say, from the block party or the open house, we had a great turnout, and there are a number of community people that came and helped and got involved. And I'm telling you, the excitement is definitely there. The parents were very excited and pleased with the outcomes of the block party and the open house. And the first day of school, we actually had the kids getting off the bus. They had the Soul Train line, as they call it, where they were celebrating kids coming in, and the kids actually looked shocked that the adults were happy that they were coming in. And it's just the feel there that everyone is on board for making this a successful endeavor for us this year. The Senate Bill 522, I don't have any additional updates from the last time we spoke, except to say that in the Senate now, they have chosen a conference committee with a stoplight approach. Hopefully, there's only one school that will be added from this information that is up there now, added this year. However, if we could go with the current legislation, we will have 4 schools that will go into the ISD this year. But the other points that you see up here are things in statute. You're already aware of the proposal for a qualifying list, a watch list, and a warning list before being entered into the ISD, and a few other changes that they have there in the legislation, such as words change from shall to may or may to shall. And so that's the latest I have on the update. The last bullet dealt with actually teacher licensure, and of course, our team members from the other areas of licensure have already talked about these things. Any questions?
Dr. Ellaby, thank you so much for bringing us up to date on Southside Asheville. Friends, what questions do you have for Dr. Ellaby, or perhaps for Tricia as the new leader of AAC? Dr. Arsenbein?
Thank you, Ms. White. Those math scores are terrific. And I heard you say the use of retired teachers may have contributed to that in some part?
Yes.
And hopefully they will return?
They have returned, so they're there. So.
We'd love to have them in reading too, right?
Yes, ma'am. Same results in reading. So we have met in all 3 areas.
And thank you for the attendance data.
Yes, ma'am.
I think that will matter. Thank you much.
Yes, ma'am.
Further comments? Mr. Duncan?
Dr. Elby, can you put the slide back up that showed what the school's doing this? Next slide. Yeah, that one.
This one? Okay,
Yeah.
yes, sir.
I hate to do this, and I'm speaking.
No, sir.
I'm speaking for myself and not for the board, to be clear. But I can't support the notion of fully implement the K-3 reading strategy iStation right now as we sit here, given the fact that there's a stay in place by the court, and I feel reluctant to, as soon as that stay's not in the way, I absolutely support what you're doing in doing that. But as long as there was a stay that's been made, I need to state personally that I can't support that.
Yes, Mr. Duncan.
Unless and until the stay is removed. And I'm sorry for that intrusion.
Okay.
Reggie Keaton has left the conference. Mr. Buxton.
I really want to know if Don Cornelius was at the Soul Train. These guys will look at me like, who? First off, I recognize we have new leadership.
Yes, sir.
Your role, and with Tricia Cottom, and I would say from personal experience when she was running house education, tremendous leader for AAC, and it's great to see her and her experience there. These slides have answered the question for me about, it came up last time, and with the student data, which is tough to see, with the exception of math, as Dr. Oxenden pointed out, about what's going to be different that the Innovative School District leadership here is doing to support Southside Asheville. So your role is clear in the advance we're seeing here in the department's role. I want to ask an admittedly tough question, and maybe not fair for Ms. Cottom because she's in week 3, so maybe it's best for you, but I'm happy. Given the importance of this school, the size of this school at about 240 kids, the focus on this school, it is the one school that essentially we provide wraparound support to. I just need to understand why we should have confidence in our operator that we've chosen given the results we've seen thus far.
One, I would say the operator helped us. It was a collaboration to choose the school director that we chose. And because we're collaborating now, I believe that our services and support will align. And really, Tricia and I need to get out of the way of the school director because we talked about earlier in our reform meeting how leadership makes the difference. And I tell you, at that school, leadership makes the difference. So Tricia and I are really trying to be the backbone and the support to him and collaborate with him and the school in order to move it forward. So I do feel we are definitely on the right track to get the results that we need this upcoming school year.
So much for the update. Mr. Chair, this concludes our
Thank you.
report for today.
Thank you, Ms. White. We'll now take a 15-minute break and reconvene at 3 p.m.
Yes, there we are. They've been from the previous leadership.
I see. So his Gotcha. I was trying to figure, okay, gotcha.
And like I think reasonably said, I think we're fine. We're going to put school operations in the hands. Like, I don't really think we can be the operator. Put that out there.
Initial reaction.
Push the button.